Hello, and welcome to the fifth of our videos in the onboarding series for silver and gold customers of Workshop software. In today's session, what we're going to discuss is the following. We're going to talk about customers, how to bring customers into the system, best practice form for entering customers, vehicles, how to set up your mechanics within the workshop, and also how to manage the users of your workshop software system, being both mechanics and admin users. Right, so let's get stuck right into it. So to go into the customer table for a moment, right, what I'm going to do is we have a whole list of customers here. You've got their mobile numbers, you've got their phone numbers. If I open up a customer record, here we have first name and last name. If your customer, by the way, is a company, you can simply come over to this toggle on the top right quadrant, and you can switch that over from individual to company. And then you can enter the company address or the company name here, and of course the address details as follow. When you're entering a telephone number or contact numbers for either your individual or your company, please remember that your mobile number field will format as a mobile number, and your phone number field will format as a telephone landline. All right. It's probably also very important to specify their email address if you have one from them. And the purpose for that is if you need to get in touch with them for service reminders or to send them emails with their invoices or their statements attached, the email is going to be very, very important. Over on the right-hand side, you have the preferred method of contact for a customer. That can be either email or SMS. In some instances, you may get customers who opt out of getting any contact from you, or you can use paper documentation if you'd like. All right, so you have the opportunity to specify which is the preferred method of contact for your customers. Down below that, you have the customer sources, and of course, this is a very, very good feature of Workshop software insofar as it allows you to gather this information when you're entering a job for a customer or when you're entering a customer for the first time into the system. You can put down the source of how that customer came to your workshop. There are other details that you can use. Price types for customers will relate directly to the various different price types options which you have when you're entering products into the system. The standard selling price would be the retail price, and that should always include GST. If you have a preferred rate, such as a tradies rate, for example, let's say that your charge-out rate for labor was $110, but for tradies you have a preferential rate of $100, then you would put $100 in price level 2, and when you were setting up that customer's record, you would actually change them from the default of retail pricing over to price level 2. Price level 4 can be used quite often for mechanics within the workshop itself. If they're using parts from the inventory system to repair their own vehicles or service their own vehicles, you could put those down at price level 4. And we would recommend that price level 4 quite often is going to be your cost price. So you would have the cost of $10, let's say, and you would say the price level 4 would be $10 as well. Right? That way you may not make any money on the part when it goes out of the system. However, we'll be able to track it within the inventory function. That will be discussed in more detail in the next video, which is all about products and bundles and so on. All right, so just to give you a bit of an insight into the importance of actually entering all your customer details, what I've done is I'm going to pop open an invoice here. All right. Now, the invoice is the identifier of your business up here, all right? And here we have the customer details. And as you can see, this actually looks quite professional and quite neat because you've got the customer's first and last name, you've got all of their address details, and you have all of their contact numbers, all right? It's probably a well-known fact that customers will really appreciate that. They may not say very much about it, but they do appreciate that you've taken out the time and the effort to capture all of their details and present them with a much more professional looking document. All right. That's the importance of putting in the details for your customer invoices. All right. So these are all here. Now, the easiest way to add a customer to the system is to simply come into the customer table. I'm going to save that. And you can enter a one-off customer like this. All right, that's one method of doing it. All right, and again, like I said, it can be either an individual or a company. Also, it's probably worth noting that you can also specify at the time that you set up a customer whether or not they are a cash customer, so they are expected to pay on the day when you finish the job, or whether they're an account customer. And indeed, if they are an account customer, it's probably very, very important that you come down to the field down here, the payment terms, in the middle of the page, and specify what their payment terms are as an account customer. All right. Now, there's another way to enter your customers into the system, right? You can come up here, all right, and do a customer invoice, for example, or even a customer booking. And in either of these, you can add a new customer. So if I come into a customer invoice, what I'll do is save that. I can add a customer by simply coming in there, clicking on the plus sign on the right-hand side. And again, it's exactly the same format as the customer table. It's either an individual or a company, and it's either cash or account. All right. And again, as I mentioned earlier on, right, you have the details here, address details, and then also the preferred method of contact and their pricing level. You do not have to set a pricing level. The default that will automatically come into the system is retail, and you can change the pricing level at any point you want in the customer record. And of course, over here, we have the customer source. All right. That's how you would enter a new customer if you were going to go straight into an invoice. If you were going to do it through a booking, it will be exactly the same process. We come in here, you can add a new customer in here. All right. Again, the same type of fields. All right. Now, that covers how you manage your customers on a one-by-one basis. Now, you do have the ability, if you are coming from another workshop management system, or whether you're coming from an accounting system, or if you simply have your customers in an Excel spreadsheet, or even if you've just had them on paper, you can import your customer base into workshop software. And we have set up several templates for that. What I'm going to do is point you to where you would go to do that. If we came into the Help Guides and Resources up here in the top right-hand corner, we go to the Help Guides and Resources. What we do is we type in importing data. And you have several different options, right? So you have the data migration guide or fixing data ready for importing. If we go into the data migration guide and click on that particular article, here's a whole article which is very important to read, so you have a bit of an understanding of how the import process works. All right, and then down at the bottom of the page, we have templates. Okay, so this is a customer import template, a vehicle import template, suppliers, products, history headers, history lines, and so on. Most of these you won't necessarily need. These four would probably be the ones you would use most commonly. So if I open up the customer import template for a moment, as you can see, it's an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to pop that open. And here is our spreadsheet for the customer import. As you can see, there are a whole series of column headers, and these will accommodate all of the data that you have or that you may want to import into your customer file in workshop software. There are very, very clear instructions in that article, which I just opened up for you, which was called the Data Migration Guide. And if you follow those instructions, you should be able to bring in all of your customers, their vehicles, and your suppliers into workshop software within a very, very short period of time. If you need any assistance, please feel free to get in touch with Workshop Software, and one of our friendly staff will be more than happy to help you get your data imported into the system. So I'm going to close that for the moment. There we are. The next feature I would like to discuss with you is how to set up your mechanics in Workshop Software. These are a very, very integral part of the system, and basically they are going to allow you to manage your mechanics and also to bring in a major part of the revenue, which is the labor component of the invoices that you produce for your customers. So if we go into the mechanics table, we have 4 mechanics in here at the moment. All right, we're going to go into build blogs for a second. And when adding a mechanic, you simply do the same thing as the customer table. You click on the plus sign, and that opens up a new mechanic record. In this particular instance, we're going to go into build blogs. So First thing you do is you put in the mechanic's first name, then his last name. And most importantly of all, right, is you need to capture the cost per hour for this mechanic to work for the workshop, right? Now, what we've done is we've put in this basic formula. So if you take a mechanic's net pay, which would be the money he receives in hand, and you divided that by a 40-hour week, for example, that would give you a base rate of $22.50, which was coming out of the till every hour on the hour. On top of that, what you need to do is you need to capture the money which needs to be set aside to pay the government for income tax or PAYG, right? When you multiply the hourly rate by the PAYG rate or the income tax rate, which I've classified at 30% for Australia, but will be different in your particular jurisdiction, right? Just put in the correct percentage. Then you will get another number coming out of that, all right? That is what is basically known as the gross pay. In Australia, the superannuation is 9.5%. So this is how it's represented in a formula, 1.095. And it may vary depending on your jurisdiction. All right. Once again, this is a number which you should try to capture when you are entering your mechanic's cost per hour, simply because it's money which the workshop needs to set aside to pay to the superannuation company for your mechanic. All right, so here's a manifestation of the formula. If it's $900 divided by a 40-hour week, that would be $22.50 an hour. The $22.50 an hour then comes down here, times 1.3, which is adding another 30% to it, would give us $29.25. That would be the gross. Then you would have the gross, which is $29.25, times 1.095, which is the superannuation. That would come out with a total of $32.03. Now, what we also recommend that you do is, because the workshop needs to pay for a workers' compensation policy or an accident policy on an annualized basis, that is another additional cost for the workshop, as well as the annual leave which any of your mechanics will take as they work through a year. So you need to set aside the funds for this. And we say that those are costs to the business, so therefore they should be captured. We ended up with $32.03 for this particular mechanic. And what we said is add another $2 or so to that, okay? And that would work out to about $34 an hour, okay? That encompasses the taxation, the superannuation or the pension payment, and also an additional amount of money over the period of the year to compensate for his annual leave and the insurance policy for the workshop. Once you have this cost per hour, then when a mechanic clocks on and clocks off a job, or whether you manually put that data into the system, right, you will have, if your charge out rate was, for example, $110 per hour, then the profit that the business would make on 1 hour's worth of work from billed logs would be $110 minus $34, okay? And that would allow you to actually see the profit of 1 hour's worth of work. The second most important element of setting up a mechanic correctly is to put in their schedule. We recommend that you start on a Monday, and then what you do is you persist the schedule from Monday through to Friday. All right, so in this particular instance, because the settings for the workshop are as follows, hold on a sec. The workshop is open from 8 until 5. Okay, that is when you would actually do bookings. All right. And so this needs to be reflected for the mechanics so that a mechanic can start a booking at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And he could get booked out straight through to 5 p.m. And so what you do is you come in, you go 8 a.m. So if I come in here, a.m. is at the top. You just pick the hours of when they start. And if we go into that, you can see that you get it in 5-minute increments throughout the hour. All right. We say that Bill starts at 8. Okay. And he finishes at 5. 5 o'clock, the PM is down at the bottom. And once again, you just pick the time that you want, and you get 5-minute increments for each of those hours. So we come down here, and we go 5 p.m. That's fine. And then we persist the schedule from Monday through to Friday. And so if we go into the schedule now and look at Friday, it's exactly the same. If we look at Saturday, Bill doesn't work on Saturdays. If indeed your mechanics do work on Saturdays, you can simply come in here and put in whatever time you want for them to start. You may have a late start on Saturday mornings, right? And you may have an early close. They may close at 1 p.m. All right? And what we would do is we would save that. Okay? And now if we look at the schedule, we have 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And on Saturday, 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. That is how you set up your mechanics in workshop software so that you can actually calculate the profitability of the hours worth of labor that get carried out in the workshop. Now, the next thing to do is to set up your mechanics so that they can actually use the mobile app from workshop software so that you can assign them jobs and clock on and clock off the jobs. So once you've set up a mechanic and you've saved all of his details, right, what you can do is you can come over here in the top right quadrant to the head and shoulders and click on the plus sign. What we're going to now do is we're going to create a mobile user for Bill Blogs, right? So that he can download the app, which is a free app available on the Android or Apple platforms, and that can be installed on their telephones. So what we're going to do is set him up so that he can actually use that. I click on that, okay? Then I have the mechanic, and let's go in here. It's Bill. Okay, there it is, and Blogs. There it is, okay? You need to make the status of your mechanic active. And I will cover that in a bit more detail in a couple of minutes. Now, to set up for the user for the mechanic to log on to the mobile app, they need to have an email address, all right, and a password, or an identifier and a password. So in this particular instance, what we always recommend is not to use a real email address. Our recommendation is you go first name at lastname.com. It does not have to be a real email address because there's no particular reason for the mechanic to use an email, right, when they're actually logging onto the system. This is just really an identifier, right? The next thing we need to do is to put in a password. The password protocol is 6 characters minimum with 1 uppercase character or 1 number. So in this case, I'm going to use bingo123 with an uppercase B. So I come in, bingo 1, 2, 3. And the next thing I need to do is to confirm that. So I type it in again, bingo, 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, right, when I was typing in the confirmation password, or the confirmation of the password, the box remained red until it was an actual match. When it matched, the box turned back to blue. So you know that the email address, or the password, sorry, is exactly the same, right? Now, what we do is we save that. And once we save that, the password gets a 32-character mask so that nobody can hack the password, right? So the last point that we would like to make is that if Bill Blogs decides to leave the business for whatever reason, all right, you don't really want to delete his record. What you want to do is simply make his status inactive or blocked, all right? By making it inactive or blocked, he cannot access workshop software anymore. And what will happen is that you will maintain the history of any work that Bill Blogs did when he was working for your workshop. If you delete the record, then you delete any history of what Bill Blogs did when he was working for you. So we would always recommend that you simply change the status when a mechanic leaves from active to inactive or blocked. All right. That describes and lines up exactly how you would set up a mechanic in workshop software. And now we come to one of the most important elements of any workshop, and that is the vehicles that the workshop works with. All right. To access the vehicle table, we simply come over to the left-hand side and we click on the vehicle records. So here they are. And as you can see, we've got the registration number of the vehicle, we have the make of the vehicle, the model, and we also have who owns that particular vehicle. So here are all the customers. Now, before we go much further into the vehicle table, what I'd like to do is come back to the company settings, which is something we discussed in the first video. And if we come down here and we look at the vehicle settings, this again is where you can actually pick the types of vehicles that your workshop actually works with. In this particular instance, we've got agricultural vehicles, light commercial, motorcycles, standard system types, which is all kinds of car bodies, and then the body types for trucks and articulated vehicles. All right. And because we've got a multiple of vehicles that we actually work with in this workshop, we've turned on the advanced vehicle fields. Now, I'm going to go back into the vehicle table, and I'm going to show you where this actually comes into play. So in this particular instance, we have Eugene McDonald's Mercedes GLC. So there's his registration number. Now, if this vehicle was actually not a standard system type, as in a car, I could simply come in here and go into light commercial, okay? If this was a truck, for example, a light truck. And if I go to the body type, I will then get a completely different choice of body types, okay, for that particular vehicle. So just to give you an idea of how that works again, if I come in here and I go, that's a dual cab chassis, all right. If I then turn around and go, I'm going to go back to standard system types, all right, and I come back into the body types here, you will see that the body types have all changed again, okay. Now in this particular instance, that may very well be a sedan, all right, so we change that. Once again, just to highlight that, I'm going to go into motorcycles, for example. Say this is a motorcycle, and if I come in here, I then get all kinds of different motorcycle bodies. So I can go road bike, scooter, sidecar, whatever. All right. That just gives you an idea of how you use the different types of vehicle bodies, right, to maintain clearer and cleaner records on your vehicles that you work with. I'm going to switch that back to standard system types, and I'm going to switch that back to a sedan. Type in SED for sedan. There we have it. Okay. So the vehicle information which you can capture from your customers' vehicles is all very, very important, and this will give you much better history on your customers' vehicles. And a lot of this information we would recommend should be input by the mechanics when they're doing the actual work on a car. All right, and then it can be input into the system by the admin people or by the mechanics themselves. So you've got different options, fuel types, etc., etc. Go petrol. There's all kinds of different codes. Different drive types. You might sit there and go, yeah, it's all front wheel drive, for example. Many, many pieces of information which can be put into the system, which will deliver you a much, much better history and record of the vehicle itself. Now, the important thing about a vehicle is that it is owned by a particular customer, all right? However, this vehicle, if you ever do any work on this vehicle, you will create invoices and you'll create quotes perhaps, and you might create service inspections and so on. All these pieces of data all become history for this particular vehicle. And the interesting thing about this vehicle is that I can transfer the ownership of this vehicle to someone else. And if I were to do that, okay, I would simply come across here onto the right-hand side to the star, and I'm going to transfer the ownership of this vehicle and all of its ensuing history, all of its invoices, all of its service history, etc., which I've created in Workshop software, and that will go with the vehicle over to the new owner. So if I click on transfer ownership and I go, I'm going to change it over to Aaron Hall, for example, okay, another one of my customers, because he bought the car from Eugene McDonald. I simply switch that over and I confirm that. Okay, we save that. All right. And now you can see the ownership of this vehicle is through Aaron Hall. So if one of your customers decides to sell a vehicle and the new owner says, you know, where do you get your vehicle serviced? And he goes, I've always had it done by the guys over at Smart's Workshop, right? Then you can come in, set up the new customer, all right, who's the new buyer from that vehicle, and you can transfer the ownership of that vehicle and all of its history directly over to the new owner. A very, very nice feature and very important feature of Workshop software because it allows you to actually maintain very clear history of the particular vehicle itself. I would go so far as to say that the registration field in Workshop software for a vehicle is probably the most singular important field in the whole of the system because it is the one that is absolutely unique. All right. You can have customers with the same name. You can have all kinds of different scenarios, products with the same properties and so on and so forth. But the registration number and a vehicle, okay, are probably the most key fields in Workshop software, simply because this will tie directly to the history of all of the vehicle. All right. So we're going to save that. Okay. And now if we go back into the vehicle table, you can see that Aaron Hall, if we go into Aaron Hall as a customer, we will see that he now has two vehicles, for example. So I come in there, I come down. Well, actually, he's got several vehicles, but here's the GLC, which he bought from Eugene McDonald. Okay, here it is, right? Plus, this was the vehicle that he owned before, and he also has a couple of motorbikes. Anyway, that is a brief history and overview of how you manage the vehicle tables. All right. Once again, you can import vehicles into Workshop software, and you would do it in the same way that we discussed when you were looking at importing customers or suppliers, right? You come in here into the user guides, help guides and users, help guides and resources, I should say, and go import data. And once again, there will be a spreadsheet okay, in the data migration guide, which allows you to bring in all of your vehicles, as you can see right there. That brings us to the end of this morning's session on customers, mechanics, user management, and vehicles. Thank you very much for watching the video, and please stay tuned for the next video.